It's 12:03, September 27, 2025. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on investing in Nigeria's state-level electricity markets. I'm delighted that you've joined us for what promises to be an insightful discussion. This webinar is sponsored by Dear Nigeria, a comprehensive energy solutions provider that is making reliable energy accessible across Nigeria. The company, Dear Nigeria, provides solar installations, reliable cooking gas deliveries, on-demand diesel for generators, electricity vending services, energy accessories, and advanced monitoring tools to estates, hospitals, restaurants, as well as other small and large businesses via the website dearnigeria.com or through the Dear Portal app available on Google Play Store and iOS Store. Now, before we dive into our conversations, allow me to introduce our speakers for the day. Nkem Nnenne is a legal and energy policy expert with deep expertise in regulatory compliance, corporate governance, and renewable energy. She holds an LLM from the University of Warwick and is certified by the Renewable Energy Institute, Scotland. Nkem has advised on Nigeria's landmark Electricity Act of 2023 and played a pivotal role in shaping state electricity markets in Enugu, Anambra, and Katsina. She has also contributed to donor-funded initiatives that advance the institutionalization of interconnected mini-grid development and rural electrification programs. Passionate about sustainable development, Nkem is dedicated to accelerating decentralized, climate-aligned energy systems across Africa. You're welcome to today's webinar, Nkem.
Thank you for having me, Omono.
Great. We also have Uade Ahimie. He is a trailblazer in Africa's corporate sustainability, leveraging over 30 years of leadership in energy, finance, and media to drive ESG excellence and ethical governance. A chartered accountant and co-founder of Sustainable Stories Advocates Limited, he champions credible sustainability narratives across Africa. His groundbreaking book, Crappy Facts: Perspective for an Emerging Market, explores ESG challenges in African economies. At Sahara Group, Uade pioneered frameworks for audit, risk, and compliance, and authored its first sustainability report in 2015, a milestone later replicated at Ikeja Electric and Egin Power PLC. As head of strategy at Nairametrics, he shapes policy and transparency, while his consultancy with Egin Power advances sustainability reporting. A mentor in Nigeria's fintech scene via financial services innovators, and a frequent analyst on platforms like Arise TV and Smooth 98.1 FM, Uade fosters innovation and youth development. His work as Sustainable Stories Advocate continues to redefine corporate integrity and sustainable growth in Africa. You're very welcome, sir, to this webinar. I think you're muted.
Thank you, Omono, for having me, and thank you for putting me in the same space with Annie. So Annie would share all the legal background, and I will try and reciprocate by sharing the knowledge I have.
It's an honor to be here with you.
Great. Yeah, an honor all round. Now, before we tackle our questions for the day, allow me share a little background on Nigeria's state electricity markets. As we all know, according to the provisions of the 2023 Electricity Act, states can now generate, transmit, and distribute electricity if the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, NERC, has transferred regulatory oversight to the said states. As of August 2025, Edo, Ekiti, Enugu, Imo, Kogi, Lagos, Niger, Ogun, Ondo, Oyo, and Nasarawa have been given such powers. Let us now start and tackle our questions for the day. My first question goes to Nkem. How do federal electricity policies interact with state-level regulations, and what should investors watch out for in this evolving landscape?
Okay, thank you, Omono, for that question. So from your question, I figure there are two questions in one. How does the state and electricity market interact with each other? And the second one is what would investors look out for? So although you have provided a background, but I want to say something because I figured there might be some people here that are not in the energy sector. The question I want to address is how come is there federal level regulators and also state level regulators? Like you said, Omono, the electricity before the amendment of the 1999 Constitution, the states do not have any right whatsoever to enter into or to legislate in anything electricity except for off-grid. But when there was, after the amendment of the 1999 Constitution, it gave the states rights to legislate or enter into activities that have to do with electricity generation, electricity transmission, and distribution. So after that, the Electricity Act was now enacted, which gave the states the right to generate electricity, transmit, and distribute. And it also provided guidelines for you to do that. And one of those guidelines is that there would have to be a state electricity law, which would establish a state electricity regulatory commission. Now you see there's the national regulator, which is the NERC, the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, and the State Electricity Regulatory Commission for the states that want to establish their state electricity market. The intent of the law is not that these two regulators would compete, but the intent of the law is that they would coexist, collaborate, and interact with each other to align and achieve the national electricity goals. So the intent of the law is for there to be a strengthened relationship between the state regulators and the federal regulator. It's not for any competition or any seniority between these two regulators. The two regulators are meant to interact with each other to align with the national energy goals. So that is it. And for what investors, that's the second part of the question, right? What investors will have to look out for. Can you confirm, Omono, if I got you right? What investors should look out for
Yes.
is the electricity markets, right?
Yes.
So for an investor, what you should look out for in state electricity market is whether these states have the enabling environment to operate or drive a state electricity market. The main essence of state electricity market is to bring in investors. If there are no investors, most of these state electricity markets will struggle. So as an investor, if you're coming into a state electricity market, what you should look out for is this states, do they have the enabling environment to coordinate or to invite investors? Are the policies, are they favorable to investors? These are the things you should look out for. And another thing is the regulatory environment. Does it favor investors? What is the regulatory environment like? The people driving the state electricity market, do they have what it takes to drive the state electricity market? What is it in the regulation that would favor investors in the electricity market? An investor coming into a state should look at the investment framework of these states, look at the trade and investment guidelines and provisions for investors in the state. Are there concessions? Are there tax breaks? Are there what are the duties? What are the provisions that you have in the state that will be favorable to investors? And most importantly, you have to look at for investors that are interested in maybe power plants, you have to look at the land laws of these states. What are the provisions of these land laws? Are they clear? Are they favorable? If a financier or an investor wants to come into a state, the investor will be interested in knowing if these laws are clear, because financing follows clarity and certainty of laws. So these are the things that an investor should look at. And another important point is an investor should look at is, what is the state reaction to energy offenses or electricity offenses? Do they have strict penalties for these offenses? Or if someone steals energy, or if someone bypasses or does illegal connection, would they tell the person to just pay? Would the penalty just be 100 naira like most of our laws before? So these are the points or the pointers or the enablers that investors should look at while looking for the state electricity market to invest in. Thank you, Omono. I'm back to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Nkem, for your response. My next question goes to Uade. How can investors leverage the Electricity Act of 2023 to identify and prioritize high potential state-level electricity markets in Nigeria?
Thank you, Omono. But thank you, Nkem, for giving us a good insight into where the policies are. But let me give some context about power so that people better understand that what investors should be looking at is, how do I make money? Which is what any investor is going to be looking at. And if all those other policies make sense to them, then they should look at how power is actually run, the value chain. Power is an inverted market. It means that if the consumers are not paying, nobody down the line is going to get money. And if we understand that, then your investments should trickle down from, how do I get the right amount of consumers into my projections, so that at the end of the day, what then happens is that as I continue to scale, I get new and more consumers into it. That's the first point. The second point will be, people need to understand that the investment in power is not 12 to 18 months. Your minimum break-even levels, according to studies across the world, and I was at a session 2 weeks ago where the IFC also made that point clear, is a minimum of 5 to 7 years. And the reason being that you must scale, and in scaling, the investments are not 1 naira. You know, it's not just you registering the business. The equipment need to be in place, the upgrades need to be in place, and so on and so forth. So once investors understand that, they're not coming in with their briefcase of money thinking that in 18 months I'm going to start making money. So you need patient capital and short to medium term capital towards developing those infrastructure. And then the third thing for me will be this: any investor who doesn't take into consideration the inverted pyramid style of how power works, then it's just going to be coming into an environment, whether the policies make sense or not, and going to lose, because he has come in there believing that if I generate power, then I can just sell it. And the major consumers who provide for power is not you and I. And that's one of the biggest grievances I've had with the issue of band A being 206 naira and band B being 88 naira, because you and I as individuals, we know how best to manage our pockets, because the money is not flowing everywhere. But the things that investors should look at is, how do you create that industrial and commercial offtake of power so that they will pay for your assets, upgrades, they would pay for your major investments that are coming in, and then have some extras for you to say, okay, I make some profit from investing in these assets. And then they must look at what I call the social consumers, the you, Nkem, and myself, who want power, because with power, they can do more. They can sleep better. They can run their businesses from home. They can provide so many other things and social amenities and all. And then those guys have to continually pay. In a country where you say, oh, we need to meter everybody, then those metering must be part of the investment projects and the investment cycle. Because the fact of the matter is that if you ask me to pay for a meter, that belongs to a house, not to me, and I have to move out from that space, it means I have to go and pay for another meter. So why do I want to invest in that? So all these things investors have to take into consideration and understand that if those consumers, the high-end consumers, are not paying that big money, and then the social consumers are not continually contributing on a daily basis, because people just want power. So people will vend every month 10,000. So you can imagine if 10 big consumers pay 1 million every month. Are you with me? And a 1,000 small consumers pay 1,000, or let's say 5,000 every month, or 10,000 consumers pay 5,000 every month. It's much more than those big consumers will pay. And those are the things that use to oil your infrastructure. From my background in management accounting and cost accounting, that's what you call the contribution effect, because they will pay for all your variable costs, while those big monies will continue to help you invest in the power sector. So investors who are coming in and thinking that, one, if I put my money in there today, 24 months down the line, I'm going to start making profit, please write that off, even if all the enabling environment is good. Two, they must remember that it takes at least 5 to 7 years to break even, and that from that break-even point, what it then means is that you have a consumer pot that is so large and the monies are just flowing in. Because investments in power, usually those assets 10 between 15 and 20 years, that's the standard. So if by year 7 you break even, you can imagine what you're doing from year 8 to 15. You're just milking money. Why? Because all you're doing is maintenance and upgrade. And remember, the commercial customers will pay for that. So we must understand that, and we must be able, and it's not just the investors, it's also the governments of those states. So in your enabling laws and looking for those investments, you must be centered around who is going to consume, how do they pay for it, when do they pay for it, and there you understand the cash flows. Because if the consumer is not paying, and that's the major problem you have in Nigeria today, consumers don't pay. Some will tell you, oh, it belongs to a private company, so am I paying estimated bills? Those who have meters, I know how much I spend in a month, but if I'm not at home and I'm at work, then I will shut down practically everything. So if I budget that is 20,000 a month, I would spend 20,000 a month on it, because my pockets are not overflowing with cash. So I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nkem, back to you. What legal mechanisms exist to protect private investments in state electricity projects? And how can investors structure deals to minimize regulatory risks?
Okay, like I mentioned before, without investment, state electricity markets would not work. And you find out that the essence of the whole thing would be for the state electricity regulators or the state government to ensure that the regulatory or the legal framework protects and promotes private sector investment. And you find out that when you look at all these state electricity laws and regulatory frameworks, they all promote private sector investment. They all say we want to invite private sector, we want private sector to come into our state. But a deep dive into these laws will show you that they don't really have that in-depth provisions to protect investors. But that does not mean you should not. There are no other mechanisms or avenues to ensure that the investor is protected. For instance, if an investor comes in and maybe he has looked at the laws and there are no enough protection for him, what he can do is, in the negotiation of his contract with the state, there are some mechanisms that he can negotiate in his contract, especially when it has to do with the state. If it's both private parties, I mean, it's a bit easier. But when it has to do with a state, you have to be very careful and ensure that the contract you're entering into with the state, that it is well negotiated. For instance, some of the legal mechanisms you can invoke include, there's something called internalization of contract. This is where an investor can insist that if there's any dispute resolution between myself and the state, this dispute resolution will not go to your state, because the government has what it takes to influence the state courts. The government has what it takes to make them biased and rule against you. So you would insist to have your dispute resolution in a neutral and under an internationally accepted law, under arbitration. So internalization of contracts is one of the legal mechanisms you can invoke. Another one you can use is it's called liquidity-backed instruments. They are instruments like payment guarantees or state guarantees or sovereign guarantees, where an investor can insist that in case an off-taker fails to pay me or defaults in the payment of the energy, or of the energy being supplied, or the energy or the project where the investor invested in, that the state would insist, or the state will pay off. That is guaranteeing that even where the off-taker fails to pay, that the state can make the payment. So those are the mechanisms available. Another one is for the investor to look at the regulatory framework. For instance, I will use NERC, which is Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission. A few years ago, when an individual invests in a network, for instance, sometimes our utilities, they take time in procuring transformers and all that. And some people, a community might gather together, contribute money, buy transformer. Once that transformer is connected to the network, the utility or the disco comes and says, it is our property, and there is nothing you can do about it. So it was so rampant that NERC came up with a regulation called Regulation on Investment on Electricity Networks in Nigeria. And it provided a guideline that for licensed and non-licensed investors on the network, it provides a guideline that says if someone invests in a network, these are the procedures, so that the person will be compensated in the long run. So these are the kind of things that investors should look out for when investing in a state, or the things they should look out for, or the things they would insist that it's operational before they go into a state. Another thing to look out for, like I mentioned earlier, is what are the state's reaction to electricity offenses? Like my co-panelist said, that Nigerians, some of them do not believe they should pay for electricity. They believe it's a social service, but they don't know it's a business. So most of them, it's so rampant where you see people steal energy, disconnection, bypasses, vandalism, theft of electricity infrastructure. States should ensure that these things, that the penalties are very stiff, so it would discourage such activities. So these are the things that investors that would encourage investors into a state from a legal perspective. Thank you.
Okay. I guess someone is replying to everything you've said. His name is Henry, and he's just asking, are discos treating it as a business?
Of course, discos are treating it.
Nkem, can I answer that, please?
Yeah, okay.
You can.
Okay, yes, discos do treat it as a business. And the current discos, like I know, you can beg to differ. I can see your remarks, but you can beg to differ. But I've been there. I've seen it. A number of discos have invested so much into it. ATC and C losses still haven't gone down to where it should be. ATC and C losses, if you want to run this business, should not be more than 5%. But if you are in a scenario like Nigeria, maybe we'll give you 10%, so that your collection is right, and so on and so forth. But yes, they treat it as a business. But you see, the thing about it is that, like I said, if over the years you have not provided service, are you with me? And you come and say, oh, I want to provide this service, and the first thing you think about is how much money do I want to make? Then you've made you stayed on the wrong road, and that's the dispute between the Nigerian consumers and the discos currently. But the fact of the matter is that I do know that in 2014, 2015, before the exchange rate went haywire, I know of a disco that had invested for free 30,000 meters in the Ikeja area. And those people are still benefiting from it. A lot of them, the small businesses, had their debts wiped out. Are you with me? And today, if you go to the Odo area and all, drive around there at night, what you will really find is just the street lights on. Most of those shops turn off their lights and not sleep only the outside light. And when you drive past there at 6 o'clock in the morning, it's the same thing. You don't see lights all over. And that I can say. And that's really, really critical. So, and the other part of it is this: when everybody says, are the discos treating it as a business, let's always remember that it's only 60% that they own. Their biggest debtor is government. So if government should put that money back into that system, because government collected 4.6 billion from discos and genscos in 2013, that I know and I'm really aware of. Have they paid back their debts? Some discos have as much as R1 billion or R1 trillion in debts to government agencies. Some of them do try and pay. Are you with me? And then the other part of it is this: if you really need to treat it as a business, and like I said, not just this band A and band B and band C, you must look at the critical issues around power. So for instance, government security services, how do you manage those places? You don't expect to give them 24 hours and tell them to pay 206 naira per kilowatt hour. From which budget are they going to get it? Even if the budget has it, is it only power that the government wants to be paying for? And you have to be careful so that discos don't go around cutting their power, because there are security issues around it. I remember one of the cases that happened in Lagos, and everybody was shouting, oh, no, it was wrong. But there were security implications. If planes were flying without anybody being able to access it, that they were a threat to national security, then there's an issue. So I'll just leave it at that. So yes, they treat it as a business, that I know. Are you with me? If you invest, if government should put back that money as, let's invest in a plan that would try and meter everybody. There's a SCADA system in this country, correct me if I'm wrong. And that's why you know when there is a grid breakdown, that's how discos know where the power can come from and if they can give some people power. And these are things that are there. But like we say, a lot of people don't look at that. They just look at, okay, they've sold it to the discos, they are just collecting money. But there's also a mechanism to even the bills that you pay, because not all of it is billed back to the consumer. For those who don't have meters, correct me, Nkem, if I'm wrong. NERC actually has a methodology for it. At least almost between 20 and 30% doesn't go back to the consumer. So there's a lot of theft, there's a lot of waste, and that waste, NERC has provided between 20 and 30%, depending on the area where you are. For those big discos, sometimes it's 15% that they are allowed. They only allowed 70% billing for estimated billings. These are the realities. So who pays that money for all the infrastructure upgrade? Who pays the money for metering? I remember MAP. We did MAP, and everybody forgot the fact that if we were going to bring in meter parks and assemble them in Nigeria, you're going to pay duties on them. And that's what stalled MAP. So let's also continue to, yes, I would try as much as possible to tell everybody what it is, but there are some things that you also need to be careful about and say they don't treat it as a business. Because let's remember, they employ close to 40,000 people. That's all the discos across Nigeria. And those 40,000 people have families that they have to treat. So I'm on back to you. Thank you, Nkem.
But in addition to what you said, the industry is very cost intensive. And there's this thing going around that, the saying going around that even those that bought the discos during privatization did not put enough funds, as stated in the performance agreement, into the business. So I'm not sure, I don't have the figures, but the saying on the street is that these investors did not put enough investment into the project, but they are expecting a lot of returns. And if you do not invest, I don't think the money would come out in any way. That's on the one part. Then the other part is on the part of consumers. Everybody wants a bite of the national cake. Most people are not paying for this power. So there's no way the situation would improve if you do not pay for what you get. It's like a retail business. It's like buying and selling. If I buy, I top up my profit and you pay for it. And in a case where you do not pay or you try to shortchange me, there is no way we would have sufficient power. There is no way the industry would grow. there is no way investors will come into the country if the ATC and C losses keeps increasing, because no matter the amount you put in the system, it will still sink it because it's not recoverable. The discos are not able to recover these funds because of one leakage or the other, because of the losses, ATC and C losses along the line. So that's just it. So there's a lot of leakages that need to be sealed in the system.
Nkem, just to add to that, I know you don't have the numbers, but I do have some numbers in my head that I can remember. In 2013, when those agreements were signed, discos were supposed to invest 5 billion naira.
Yeah.
1 billion every year. Part of the things that were supposed to be done is, as you're investing, I think about 25% of that needed to go into metering. And that's why I said one of the discos that started that. But you can remember in 2015, when you sign an agreement that says, because a lot of these components are imported, let's remember that. Even if you are metering and you're producing meters in Nigeria, a lot of it is assembled because a lot of the spare parts are not coming from Nigeria, or the raw materials are not coming from Nigeria. Now, 5 billion, a billion every year at an exchange rate of 160 to a naira. And in 2015, all of a sudden, that exchange rate stabilized at 300 naira. That's 3 times it. So your billion, which was supposed to be invested in, became 333 million overnight. And this has happened over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's some context to it. So when people say they are not investing, because I know of a disco in this country, one of the first things between 2014 and 2015 was meter all the connection points with the transmission companies, so that you know how much energy comes into their networks. That I can tell you for free. Omono, over to you. Omono, over to you.
Are you
Can
sure?
anyone hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Can anyone hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
someone else can hear
Okay,
you.
my network just died on me. Yes, my apologies. My network just died on me.
Back to you.
So, Uade, yes, you were talking. If you can just go back to what you said last, then I'll continue from there.
You know, someone was asking a question about whether the business, the discos, and Nkem gave an insight into it. So I was trying to put some figures to it. I said part of the agreement was discos to invest 5 billion over a 5-year period at an exchange rate of 160 naira to $1. And we know what happened in 2015. Some of the discos had started that, but your 1 billion turned into 330 million overnight because of the exchange rate. So those things are the realities. And I also said I know a disco who made sure that by end of 2015, they had metered all the connection points with the transmission company.
Just a question. Did the discos invest those amounts of money based on the performance contract? Were they consistent with those investments? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes, for a disco that I know very well, they've been consistent with that investment to date. And that's why you see they are among the top ranked discos in Nigeria. Why? Someone is saying consumers pay for efficiency, and I agree with you that they pay for efficiency. But let consumers also remember that when people steal the energy around them, they're actually stealing, they're actually making, they themselves are actually losing money, because those monies are not going into the discos for that investment. But I know a disco that has consistently invested in it. I know a disco that, like I said, there's a disco that I know that by 2015, the Ikeja area, they without charging one kobo for the meters, had metered about 30,000 consumers. So the thing is really for us to understand, like I said, that it's an inverted pyramid style of market, and if consumers are not playing, and I feel bad because I'm a consumer myself. I am a consumer myself, and now the difficulty and all. So, Omono, back to you.
Yes. Thank you very much for those insightful answers. I'm sure your question has been answered, Henry. So moving on, Uade, you have the next question. So what are the most effective public-private partnership models for scaling solar mini-grids to address energy poverty in rural and urban Nigeria?
Wow, that's a deep question, Omono. But there are a number of things I think needs to happen. So first and foremost, like Nkem has said, the state regulations, are they working well? Are they going to be enforceable? And then so in my own opinion, there should be joint ventures that involve the state towards all the rights that are required towards getting those investments in. Discos or those who want to invest in the disco business within that state, and the private developers also, that they share the risk, like we said. So it's not that tomorrow things go against one party and then the state says, oh, that's it and that's the end. Because operational efficiency comes from having more consumers on the line who can pay. And believe me, because of the level of poverty, you also have to take that into consideration. Like, how do you move people out of poverty so that they can increase the amount of electricity that is required? You should have what I'll call performance-based subsidy models, meaning that if I am performing at the initial part where I say, okay, it takes about 5 years for my investment to get into where it needs to get to, what kind of models do we bring in for what's it called, for performance, so that I can at least have some monies coming in from the, whether it's the state, to attract those capitals. And I'm not saying the kind of subsidy that means that the government is just paying for everybody to use power. No, subsidies that would ensure that the social aspect of power is coming back into the system, and then they move them out of that poverty level to start to be able to pay for power that is required. What kind of concession frameworks would they have with the private sector, people who want to bring in that money? One of the things that Nkem mentioned is the land policy. Is it for me that I'll come there and then they say the COO cost me $1 billion? Let's remember that if I pay $1 billion for a COO to put up a plant, whether it's transmission, generation or distribution, it means that it's part of the cost of the business. So those concessions have to come in. Whether it's tax holidays, so that you can bring some of those monies back into the system. And the last thing for me will be, how does the community react in terms of giving you a social license to operate? Are you bringing the community in from a partnership perspective to integrate, whether it's local community people, those who have trades, those who have businesses, and how they're going to benefit from it? And how do you scale them up towards ensuring that they are able to move from one point or the other? So like I said, and those will come along with those concession frameworks. Why? Because if I say I have 10,000 traders here that can scale from 10,000 naira to 1 million naira in the next 3 years, then someone has to pay for that differential for them to have that power. So all those things have to be looked at. So it's not just saying that, okay, the state has passed this regulation, oh, bring your money, and then when you are saying the agreement, the framework of the agreement is that, oh, you have to build this, you have to do this, you have to do that, without considering the fact that money is expensive. And like I said, money has to be patient for us to invest in solar or renewable energy, which is good, don't get me wrong, but that money has to be patient. It has to be patient money that comes into it. Over to you, Omono.
So in addition, let me just come in there. In addition to what you said something about the community giving you the social right to come into their community. There's something Enugu State did of recent. They established a committee for ease of doing business to handle things like this. So it's really good to see states handle all these little hitches that investors might encounter while coming into a state. So I think that's something other states could also adopt. And they also, another thing they did to help is that most of the areas where they designated for power plants have been converted from rural areas to urban areas. And what would now regulate, the kind of laws that would regulate those areas will be the one established by the state, no longer the rural or the ones under the local communities. So I think that one helps also. Back to you.
Thank you, Nkem. And I would really like to commend the the chairman of the Enugu State Regulatory Commission. He's done a lot, and these are some of the things that he's done. Like I said, the states also have to understand that power is an inverted pyramid system of business. If consumers are not paying, then everybody down that line gets no money, because the consumers are the ones who actually pay for that business. Over to you, Omono. Back to you. I hope she's still there. She's jumping in and out of the session.
I don't think she's still here.
I'm not sure. So Nkem, maybe we'll just continue the discussion, because we have the questions, and then maybe you look at the next part, and then I'll come at next part, and then we'll go on till she can come back in.
Okay, let me just a minute. Let me read out the question. So the next question is, what are the key licensing and compliance requirements for different electricity market participants at the state level across Nigeria? Personally, I think this question is a lot, because there are lots of we have almost 10 state electricity markets now, and each of them have their own unique features and the unique rules they have brought into licensing and compliance. So, but generally, any person that wants to engage in the business of generation, transmission, distribution, supply, trading, and retailing of electricity must have a license. There are different procedures for different states, but I will just pick on them on a general level, and at the end I'll refer everyone to the particular regulation that provides for all these requirements. For instance, in Enugu, if you want to get a license in the energy sector, they even have licenses for manufacturing of electricity equipment, and some other states do not have that. In addition, I'm talking about Enugu a lot because I also worked with the ERC to develop some of those frameworks. So I know a lot about Enugu, and that's why I keep making reference to Enugu. So for Enugu State, they also have a requirement for licensing when you want to do ICT or bring internet, whatever form of internet services within the electricity sector. And again, another difference is the amount of power you need to generate before you seek for license. While in Lagos State, once you're generating anything more than 1 megawatt, you have to get your operational license. But in Enugu, it's only for only captive generators. When you want to develop or generate more than 3 megawatts, that's only when you can approach the commission for license. So there are different procedures or the things you do and different documentations if you need a license, depending on the kind of services you're going for. But let me talk of the generation license. If you want, generally, you would have to download the application form from their website, fill the application form, and pay the required fees, because it's from these fees that these regulatory commissions get revenue that they use to run their organization or the institution. So you pay the required fee, send the application form, the fee payments, and the documentation to the commission. The commission will look at it, see if it's okay with them, if the documentation is complete, and then send it back to you that they've approved it. Then you now have to go ahead and publish your request to have a generation or to get a generation license from the commission in a national daily. And then there will be a public publication or a publication in national dailies stating your request and asking the public to comment if anyone has any objection to issuing the license to you. So I think that lasts for like 45 days to 60 days. And the commission will now gather the responses from the public and make a decision based on the responses from the public, whether to issue you the license or to refuse the license. So it's like a hallmark of processes, but I think Enugu kept it as short and as reasonable as possible. Then what are the documentations you need or the things you need to comply with before they give you this license? There are general compliance requirements, there are also regulatory compliance requirements, and there are also technical compliance requirements. For the general compliance requirements, your company needs to be incorporated with CAC, of course. You need to be paying tax. You have to have your tax compliance certificate. You have to have VAT. You have to be tax compliant. Then for the regulatory requirements, you must not own shares in another licensee company. You or your subsidiary, the parent company or the subsidiary, will not own shares in another licensee company, except the commissioned things that the state electricity market would suffer if we did not give you this license. But generally, I think the intent would be, okay, if this company owns a generation license, manage your generation license. Let us give another company the opportunity to manage maybe the transmission. The law specifically stated that if you own a generation license, they can't give you a system operations license, except it is shown that if they don't give you this license, it would affect or restrict the state electricity market. So those are on the part of the regulatory compliance requirement. Then for the technical compliance requirements, that depends on what exactly the kind of business you're doing. If you're doing solar power plant, the requirements, they are different from you're doing a gas-fired power plant or you're doing biomass. All of them, they have their own different requirements. But generally, you will provide the site plan, you will provide your environmental impact assessment report, you will provide letter from funders that if we give you this license, there's funds for you to progress or proceed with the project. You also bring letter from your technical partners. There are a whole lot of, you bring letter, your EPC letter, there are a whole lot of documentation before these things are issued to you. So I want everyone to take note that of the important thing that you need general requirement, compliance requirement, there's technical compliance requirement, and there's regulatory compliance requirements.
Thank you.
That's generally.
Okay then, thank you, Nkem. So maybe I'll just take up my own question, which speaks to how can risk mitigation strategies such as insurance against infrastructure, vandalism, enhance investor confidence in Nigeria state level power projects. And what I would say to that is that first and foremost, the new Insurance Act should be something that we should all try and use and start to look at how we manage the power sector. So when you look at that, you have to work with the government towards ensuring that the there are kinds of insurance schemes that would address the risk like infrastructure vandalism, policy instability, to reduce the investor exposure to unforeseen losses. We spoke about community partnerships also. That's another way how you can mitigate some of these risks that are inherent. I spoke about bundling the insurance with special packages, with financial packages that can lower borrowing costs and improve bankability of state level electricity projects. I believe strongly in the state electricity projects. Why? Because the states are closer to the consumers and they understand them better than the federal government, who would just come in and say, okay, we built a plant and decide. And then the decision making for where plants are built is also a major aspect towards de-risking those investments. You heard Nkem say, talk about the compliance and the technical aspects, because sometimes the areas might not be very feasible. So what kind of structures, guarantees will the government put in place towards ensuring that those risks can be managed? Facility sharing the risk of managing those facilities, for instance, providing security services at the barest minimum cost, can enhance the confidence of creating safety nets for investors, and those are critical things that investors need to look at, state regulatory authorities and even the state governments need to look at, so that in putting those policies together, it's not just writing a policy for the sake of it, but also looking at the fact that investors who want to who have patient money to put into this sector are willing to put that money and are patient enough to wait 5-7 years before they start to see the kind of returns that they expect from the sector. Over to you, Nkem.
Okay. I also want to mention that in case you are interested.
Sorry,
Omono is back.
Sorry to interrupt. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been back for a while. Sorry, I don't know. I have 2 Wi-Fi networks here, and 2 of them are just messing me up. I'm so sorry. I see that you're taking your questions. Sorry, Nkem, you were saying something. Please go ahead.
Yes, I want to refer everyone to a regulation in case you're interested in knowing all the requirements of any form of investment you want to do in the state electricity that requires licensing. You can check the regulation on licensing application for generation, transmission, distribution, trading, supply of electricity. Each of those states that have their state electricity market should have this regulation outlining the general procedures, the technical procedures, and the regulatory procedures you need to follow to get this licensing. Thank you, Omono. Back to you. And by the way, we've taken the third question.
Yes. How about I reach out to you after this webinar, and then you just give me those details and I put them out on the Gear Nigeria platform? I think that will also help.
That's fine. That works. That works.
Okay, great. So the last question for both of you, going back to you, Nkem, what dispute resolution options are available for electricity investments, and how enforceable are power purchase agreements in state-level markets?
Okay, for dispute resolution mechanism, the regulation that is in charge of any dispute resolution, any activity in procedural activity in the state electricity market is usually called business rules or market rules. It outlines the procedures for dispute resolution and all that. So each state should have their own, or most likely adopt the one that NERC has. In any case, sometimes, especially in large ticket transactions, the parties to this project would negotiate something different. Like I said before, if in the course of the project you find out that something is not favorable to you, in your power purchase agreement you can negotiate separately. For instance, most times you find out that the state, or let me go back to, for the benefit of those that are not in the power sector, let me explain what is a power purchase agreement before I proceed to answering the question. A power purchase agreement is an agreement entered into between the seller of electricity. In this case, it will be an independent power producer, a generation company, and a buyer of electricity. In this case, can be a large power consumer, or it can be a utility like a disco or a bulk trader. And this agreement sets out the terms of the agreement. It sets out what should be the content of the agreement and the terms of the transaction. So that's one of the major contracts in the power sector. It's like a definitive agreement entered into by parties in a power transaction. So for you, for it to be enforceable, you have to negotiate some clauses in the contract. On a general note, power purchase agreements are highly enforceable, but there are cases where the enforceability might not be absolute, especially when it has to do with states. If it's two private sector entities or parties, it's usually easier. But when you have probably a private sector entity and a state, you have to be very careful and negotiate, have robust clauses in your contract. For instance, when it has to do with a state, there can be a change in law. A change in law can come in and destabilize and change almost everything. So you will have it at the back of your mind while negotiating these things, and for it to be enforceable, you will have something to protect yourself. You would have a clause in the contract saying, even in the case of a change of law, that your contract or your project will be unaffected. There should be stabilization contracts. Also, the things you have to look at when it has to do with a state is, what if an off-taker defaults in payments? What would you do? Who do you run to? So in that case, you would ensure that in enforcing your PPA, that something like a sovereign waiver of sovereign immunity, or waiver of or even payment guarantees or sovereign guarantees are included in your contract. So these are the things that you should always that will make your contract more enforceable, your PPAs more enforceable. So on a general note, you should ensure, for you to ensure enforceability of your contract, you should ensure that you negotiate robust clauses in case anything happens, change of law, change of anything, like even change of government. Do you understand? So there are lots of risks when it comes to states that will make your PPAs unenforceable. So these are the clauses you should include and negotiate for it to be more enforceable. Thank you. I'm back to you, Omono.
Thank you very much, Nkem. So your final question, Uade. Which Nigerian states show the strongest potential for investment in renewable energy projects? And how can international funding like the AfDB $1.1 billion loan be optimized to support these opportunities?
Thank you, Omono. Omono, you're putting me on the spot, telling me to tell you which states. You want the state governments to start chasing me around. Anyway, yes. So let me start by saying this. Let me start with the investment part. For the kind of funding that we require, first and foremost, we need single-digit interest rates. It's really, really important. Like I said, I was at a session about 2 weeks ago, and I spoke to one of the IFC representatives, and who said they're trying to work out some things, because the IFC, for instance, they can either invest or they can give you a loan. So they need to be able to come in. And when Nkem was talking about guarantees, those are the kind of things that you're looking for. But to guarantee those things, you have to make sure that the cash flows work for you, so that they are only short term in nature, where there's a gap in the cash flow of the business. So with that, we need single digit loans. So even if and then that's something that the central bank has to look at. Are you with me? Through whether it's one of the development bank arms, that they would have to put that in place. And these monies are not going to come as, like I said, 12 months or 18 months money. They have to be minimum of 5 years to even start towards the construction, because the construction can take 3 to 4 years before you even start to generate anything or transmit or even distribute. So those things you have to look at. And that will bring me to the fact that those kind of loans, you have to optimize them with local banks blending those finance structures, and let the local banks, I know they've gotten burnt a lot from 2013, and a lot of them are trying to run away. But when you have interest rates at 27%, nobody wants to invest in 5 years at 27%, and the money is just there sitting down, when they can trade it every 90 days and make 30-40% in what's it called. So even if you are not doing anything, you are making at least 10-15% returns on those kind of funding. And that's it. So when you direct those funds and then have special packages that have to do with renewable energy, but in conjunction with having a larger scale of energy generation from the states, and some of the states, I'm not one that will tell you that, oh, fossil oil should go away immediately. That's not true. It will not happen. In Germany, they are still using coal to generate electricity. So a state like Enugu State, who has coal, but how do you mine that in the right way so that they are sustainable, the environment is not hampered, people are not at risk. And then you find out that the blend of the cost of using coal along with renewable energy is higher, and those cash flows just continue to run, especially when they are single digits rates, and then the guarantees that come from major organizations or donors like the AfDB. Now, coming back to the states, Lagos, where I stay, is one. They were one of the first set of people that put in their regulations, because one, they have the population, but like I said, the structure and manner in which people invest in it has to change from the fact of just looking at it as generation, transmission, and distribution. You have to look at it as an inverted pyramid. Who is going to pay for this power? And it's not, I put the solar panels up today and then tomorrow you think I'm going to make back my 1 billion. It won't happen. So Lagos State is one, because the regulation is tight, and a lot of the states have modeled, have used Lagos as a good model towards building their state regulations. Enugu State is one. I'm not trying to make Nkem extremely happy, but I'm just saying that because the man in charge of NERC, and I've met him once, he sold an idea that makes sense. If 45% of the state doesn't have power and 60% of the state stays in rural areas, then in putting those kind of regulations of moving rural into semi-urban into urban, meaning that you're projecting how you can scale power within that state. So whether it's renewable or it's going to be coal, those are kind of business models that you want to look at. So I can start from small and then I move up to medium, and who knows, by the time it's 10 years and you're already making money from industry parks and all. I'll use an example in Ghana where one of the financiers who invested in that agreed on a 6 megawatt plan, but today they are scaling to 200 because those industries have started to use that energy, but there's still excess capacity around the communities around them, and that's the model that we must always follow. If those big people who use electricity like there is no tomorrow don't pay for a lot of those assets, then me, or whether it's Omono or Nkem or Uade, we're not going to be able to pay for it, and that's the reality of it. And so Lagos is one, Enugu is another one, because Kanu is another place, because they've also worked out their regulations clearly. They've already started engaging the public on those regulations. River states should exhibit strong investment potentials. Why? Because of Akwa Ibom, rivers, because of the kind of oil and gas facilities, and then it attracts people who will continually consume electricity, even when the industries are doing maintenance and all. Because when there are factory maintenances that would take a week, people are not going to stop using electricity because they need electricity at home. Which other states can be very attractive for solar? In the north, particularly Kaduna and Katsina, because of that farming community. Why? Not just because of them bringing out the what's called Benue will be another state, not just because of them bringing out the food from the ground, but also being able to provide that from farm to table structure for preservation, for movements of goods and the services that come around it. Like I said about the international funding, you need to have some blended structure. CBN has to come in with specialized rates that would help investors come in, that will help the banks monitor and manage those processes. And then where states give concession, and these concessions could be towards ensuring that they do the right energy programs and models that they need to use for the communities that they want to have, so that those feasibility studies make sense. It's not just someone just saying, oh, I put a feasibility study and don't worry, in 24 months, we'll start making ₦1 billion in revenue. It will never happen in power. Let's face those realities. And then the facilities also, like I said, in terms of optimizing those funding that come into it. So those are potential states and so on. And
Taraba, just for me to jump in there, Taraba
yeah,
has the renewable energy, sufficient renewable energy potentials.
okay.
But my fear is, do they have off-takers? Do they have lots of industrial activities and communities to off-take those energy?
So let me say something to that. And that's where those who want to invest need to understand the models of the states. I mean, it's not just the regulation, but the business opportunities and models within the state. Taraba is highly agrarian. However, there are a lot of things. I know in Taraba, in Bauchi, there are some small scale businesses who process what you call rotten tomato into dry tomato that is used to blend tomato paste along with the rotten one. So there are huge opportunities. But like I said, if we're not taking it from the context of consumers, then we fail to understand our business models. For me, the biggest challenge in power today is because everybody says, oh, generate. But Nigeria has the capacity to generate 15,000. Did we look at the offtake and how those offtakes are going to work in the early stages where you're not going to make money? So are the people building those industries, 12 to 24 months industries and moving on? Are the commercial buildings now coming out next to them? Then you move into the residential areas. So those are things we need to understand in building those models, and the states need to understand this, because there's no man who wants to bring in $1 billion and 5 years down the line, if you say that's the break-even point, by year 6, it's not making at least 10% in returns from it. So patient capital is needed. Those states are highly potential, but we need to understand the consumption pattern and how you build that consumption pattern into a business model. There's an example, I can't remember the name of the company, and today they have I think they have a mini grid somewhere that generates about 1 megawatt, and the cash flow is so the receivables are guaranteed by the IFC. So even if there's a shortfall, because they know that the consumers are taking it away. So those are the kind of models you need to understand and put it in place. Not just carry your bag and because the governor says, come and invest, you want to invest. Even when they give you all the concessions in the world, you know the regulations. Even if you have all the technical ability, if you don't understand the consumer needs and how you scale those consumer needs, then we have a problem. I'll leave it at that.
I totally agree with you. And as a rider to what you said about off-takers and knowing where this energy will go to and who will pay for it, it's very, very important for states to have integrated resource plans, which is a technical document, is a power planning tool that shows where do they need this, where do they need this power, who needs it, how will it be achieved, at what cost. So each state, most states haven't, I think it's only Lagos, Anambra, just few states, Katsina, that have an integrated resource plan. But it's very, very important, and it would help investors, especially those that want to invest in distribution networks, transmission networks. It would, and even generators, it would help them to know this power we are bringing, investments we are bringing, where should we channel it to, who and who needs it, and how do we recover our investments. So it's very, very important for states to develop their integrated resource plan, and also for investors in distribution networks and transmission networks. It's important for them to look out for asset delineation frameworks of states. Where does your network start and where does it end? So these are the important points that anyone that is interested in investing in state electricity market, these are the things they should look out for, depending on the kind of business they want to bring into the state. Thank you, and that's it from me.
Okay, just to add to what you said, the states must have that flexibility for that integrated framework, because sometimes the state is looking at how do I quickly
make money.
Aside from make money, provide electricity for an area, but that area might not be feasible immediately. So you must have that, sit back and look at it and say, okay, this is part of it, and this is how we would integrate all of it together. Because if we don't start from A, point B, and putting it in point B, point A is just going to lose over that period. So point A can start to make you money, at least to pay for your assets, while point B is where you are now going to have the kind of money that you sit back and just be maintaining the asset. And let's remember, we must have a maintenance culture for the asset, for the power value chain. If you don't have that and you just think it's just build and 5 years later you're going to build again, then we missed that point. Thank you very much. From you.
There's something I saw over the week on an analysis of the mini grids in Nigeria, and trust me, the ones that are not operational are not working at all. They are more than the ones that are working. So what's the essence of deploying all these technologies, all these off-grid technologies, and they don't work? So it's very important that we also take into consideration operation and maintenance of these facilities and make sure that we have the technical skills to ensure that they are maintained.
Finally, on my part, let nobody think that it's grants that will build your power sector. That's not true. You need real money. So it's either someone is putting money into a business as a shareholder, or you're taking out the right kind of loans, blended finance, to build it over time so that you understand the what's it called, the model properly and make money. Because if the bottom line is making money, power is not just a social affair. First, power is commercial, and you must make money from the commercial aspect, and then it translates into social, which contributes additional money to that your business. Thank you very much, everyone. Over to you, Omono, if you're there.
Omono is not here. Nnenne, can you end, because we are well over the time. We are 13 minutes outside the time. Nnenne, can you close or?
Hello, everyone.
Okay.
Yeah, my name is Abdul Majid Amusa. I'm the founder of Dear Nigeria. And I think this has been a great conversation. I've been listening in, and I just really want to thank you, professionals, for talking us through this very, very important topic. And I think this sensitization is extremely, extremely important, because there's a dire need for energy consumers to really understand how this energy really gets to us, like what is really involved, like why do we have to even pay for this, and what are the roles of everyone in ensuring that this is sustainable for everyone, and what are our alternatives? Because people want their lights on today, but the grid is not the only solution, and generator is not the only solution. But how do you harness these alternatives the best way to remain affordable? These are some of the things that we can learn from conversations like this, and I just really appreciate you guys for your time. And everyone who has joined today, we appreciate you. Dear Nigeria is committed to this direction and being a thought leader in this space. So these conversations mean the world to us. We appreciate everyone. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you again next month.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.